Alrighty, welcome to another episode of Spotlight, where we talk to inspiring, talented group
Hold up.
leaders. Aspiring, just kidding.
I
Alex is
forgot
saying
to set
hold
it to auto camera, so
up.
it was just looking at him.
James. This is the James podcast.
That's
actually,
right.
so-
It's my podcast now.
Wait, so are we still rolling?
I'm not sure.
That's so funny.
Why
we'll
not?
just keep it. That's what it's for.
Yeah.
That's what it's for. We just we don't want to cut any content out. So yeah, we just talked to. This is James Sanford. I met him. Sanford.
Yes.
Sanford. I met him at the Club Fest. I was talking to just different groups, just doing some plugging. I met him there. We've had a conversation about this podcast, but beyond that, I don't know much about you. So if you want to just tell us your story, who you are, what you do.
So, I'm a psychology major at Iowa State, so that's the main thing I do here. I've been running the Atheist and Agnostic Society for about three or 4 years now. I don't know, it's kind of blurred together.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was originally created by Dr. Avalos. He recently passed away, actually. He was one of the professors in that religious studies thing. And so I took over before the pandemic started, and during the pandemic, like a lot of clubs, we kind of lost a lot of our members because no one wanted to come, with the pandemic. And so right now, what we're working on is building up membership. It's been really good. We had 7 people come to the first meeting this year.
Okay. What were the numbers like before?
One
the
or two.
pandemic? Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, it was real good.
Just a group of dudes hanging out.
That's
There's
right.
nothing wrong with that. So I guess first off, there's a lot to talk about with this because I
There
feel
is.
like people have associations with this, but they don't may not understand necessarily what it is. So first off, I'll do broader. What do you guys do at the club? Like, what is the club like?
The meeting, the club itself is primarily a social club. A lot of people would think of it, when they think of atheist club, they think of debates and stuff. And there's actually a club for that. There's a debate club. Ours is actually more of for Christians who have grew up having youth groups, stuff like that. That's kind of what this is. It's similar to SALT or the NAVs here on campus. It gives you a social community. It just doesn't have those religious undertones that SALT or those other things do. And so, because a lot of people who they're not religious, they don't have that strong community that you get with a specific religion.
Okay, and so then, I guess if you were to plan just a night, so you're planning I have people coming over. What do you do as the president then?
Well,
what
at
do you say?
our last meeting, we played Cards Against Humanity and stuff like that. I have brought my Nintendo 64 from. We played Smash.
You played Smash on 64
Oh,
instead
yeah.
of Switch. That's pretty baller.
We
That's
had
pretty baller.
Switch. We had Switch too, but I'm an old school gamer.
No,
so.
I want to bust out the N64 and see. I'm a big Smash player.
Yeah?
So I want to bust. I grew up on N64
Hmm.
because my family loved the console, and so that's bizarre that you skipped years and years of generations to play that version.
I have the Switch version, and I have brought that one before.
Okay.
But
okay.
this next week is more. It's going to be one of our members requested that we do that we talk about counter apologetics. I don't know if you know what that is.
I do not.
So apologetics would be Christians use apologetics to try and prove their religion, different arguments and the watchmaker argument, stuff like that. And counter apologetics would be trying to debunk or kind of counter the apologetics that they're using. And the reason that one of the members wanted to talk about this is because you've probably seen this. There's been a bunch of street preachers recently on campus.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And they're here every year. And sometimes there's some of the street preachers that are real nice. There's the Bible talk guy who he'll just stand there and talk with you. But then there's the other street preachers that come and they just say the most hateful things. They rile everybody on campus up.
What would be an example of something that they say?
Oh, things they're calling, pointing at students and calling them whores and stuff.
Jeez.
Yeah,
How is that? Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So it gets obviously you'll come there and you'll see like this giant mass of students like yelling at this one dude, and literally have like a couple police officers there to be like, don't do anything. And so what our club started doing was we started handing out bingo sheets with like things that we knew that they were going to say,
Okay.
and we were getting blackouts,
Yeah.
like
Wow.
the whole thing.
What would be some of the?
Things like Sodom and Gomorrah and a bunch of different slurs that I probably shouldn't say on your podcast.
No, you're all, yeah. You know, if it's something that you're scared of, I'll let it slide.
Yeah.
You could all have to go ahead and say.
So
it. That's
yeah,
fine.
and you know, quoting different verses in the Bible, obviously, but then there's a lot. They tend to bring in a lot of politics, like Trump and Biden and Hillary Clinton and George Soros. It gets real weird.
That's bizarre. I can't believe I haven't heard of that. I mean, do you think?
Some of the worst ones haven't been on campus yet. There's this one guy who comes with a billboard strapped to his chest every year, and has like things that are evil, like witchcraft and sports. And
Do you think that that's generally accepted by the Christian community, or do you think even the people that
I think
follow that religion are kind of like
a lot
ugh?
of these street preachers would be considered fringe by most
Okay.
Christians.
Okay. So you don't think that it's representative of the actual community?
Which is why we just have fun with it.
Yeah. Okay. Good. I did want to cover that because I do feel like most people probably wouldn't say that this
Right.
is what it
I mean,
seems kind of.
I grew up religious myself, so I know what what I was taught and stuff.
And you kind of have an in.
That
on what it's
certainly
like.
wasn't it.
Yeah. So I guess now we can move into the topic of like definitionally, what is atheism and what is being, I don't know what the
Agnostic?
term of agnostic is, but what is being agnostic? Like,
So
what are the terms?
agnostic and atheist are like they're like two axes. So like there's one axis which is agnosticism and Gnosticism, and then there's one which is theist and atheist. And so there you could have a Gnostic theist, which is someone who says like I believe in God, and there's nothing you can say that will change my mind. You could even have these are kind of rare, but they exist. Gnostic atheists who say I don't believe in God, and there's nothing you can tell me that will make me think otherwise.
Okay.
Then you have down agnostic theists, which are Christians who will say, I believe in God, but I could be wrong, and I admit that. And then there's agnostic atheists, which is what I consider myself, which is I don't believe in God, but I could be wrong.
Okay. And then what would you say if you were to put a statistic onto people who maybe don't know those specific, they fall into those categories, but they don't know where they are? What percentage of people would you say are each category? Are the majority of people who say that they do believe in God, but they could be wrong, or where did the proportions lie?
That's something I don't have any idea, to be honest. It's hard to know what's in someone's head, so I couldn't put a number on any of that.
What about your club, the club specifically?
In my club, most people will say that I could be wrong.
Okay.
And the club isn't just agnostics and atheists. There are some Christians who come too.
And they just come for the conversation. That's what I was going to ask next.
Yes.
I mean, you sent me that little that cross, the diagram that you pretty much just described.
Yes.
And that helped a lot. But it's like it seems like those things are different, like wildly different.
It does seem that
on a philosophical way. So it's like, how do atheists and agnostics get like put into this same group?
Well, it's because most people just don't know.
Okay, and so I mean, but in your club, you guys put them in the same group. So like, where are they? Are they similar, or would you say that they're as different as they seem, like definitionally from each other?
What, atheists and agnostics?
Yeah.
I would say that they end up being, for the most part, about the same.
Okay.
A lot of people, when they, if they're religious and they start deconverting, they'll call themselves an agnostic first, and then they'll like move into atheist, and that's just kind of a way of disconnecting themselves from the religion without doing it too fast.
Mm-hmm.
But I like to tell people that you don't have to like pick and choose. You can, and most like it are both, because unless you are because for an atheist, unless you 100% have a closed mind, you'll be an agnostic, whether you label yourself as that or not.
Yeah, okay. And so I guess what I'm wondering is, sorry, I completely lost my train of thought when I started talking. I guess what are your goals in this club other than a social network? I mean, so with Christians, the goal of Christianity is to spread Christianity and to spread the gospel. And so I guess what would be your guys' goal?
Our goal is not to like spread atheism as it per se. It would be one of the secondary goals would be like to bring visibility to atheists and agnostics. To let people know that we exist, we have a voice, and we want to have a say in things like government policy and we atheists, they do get discriminated against, obviously, and so we want to bring attention to that kind of thing.
What kind of discriminations did you?
So it really depends on where you live. I did not have the experiences that some people have, where their parents will kick them out of the house, or they'll be denied jobs or stuff. I was blessed not to have that.
Okay.
My parents, when I told them that I was an atheist, they were, of course, they didn't like it, but they're like, it's your life, and you need to choose to live it how you feel best. So, but not everybody has that experience.
And so that's like a discrimination in the family house.
Oh,
so
yeah.
just kind of like a social discrimination.
Basically, yeah. It's a lot like you come out as gay and they kick you out. It's a lot like that.
Okay. And so, I mean, I would say, do you think that exists on the opposite end? Like maybe there are atheist parents who have children who, grew up atheist.
I mean, there's a lot of people out there. I'm sure it's possible it exists, but there's no way that it's nearly
to the extent of.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see. I've met some families who are very, very gung ho about that, and it's definitely a scary thing to grow up. And that's another thing. It's like, it's so easy to be taught something your whole life and then not understand that it doesn't make, it might not make sense, or that you don't necessarily agree with it. And the only fabric holding you up and believing that are your parents. And
Right.
so it's difficult to understand when you're in that situation. And so I could absolutely understand it being difficult. But I guess it's nice that you have an experience.
Yeah.
Experience. What would you say politically or societally? Do you feel any discrimination against, I guess, any like forceful religious views or anything along those lines?
There has been a push to bring religion back in schools more and more, despite that being unconstitutional. I haven't had to deal with that yet, but I'm married and we want to have kids, and eventually we're going to want to put them into school, and I don't want them being forced to be led in a prayer at school when that's not their religion. And I would not want the same thing for anybody. This is a religiously diverse country, and everybody should be able to practice their own religion, and they shouldn't be forced to like say the Lord's Prayer at school when they are like a Muslim or they're Jewish.
No, that absolutely makes sense. And I do think that there are a lot of people who agree with you on that, even if they are Christian. I do think that it's but I haven't heard much about that being widely pushed. But I'm not saying it doesn't.
I mean, there was like
exist.
a recent Supreme Court case, which actually, so there was a coach who he would go to like the center field at the end of every game, and he would pray. And the implication was that he expected all of his students to go with him. But the Supreme Court didn't see it that way. It's like, oh no, he's like a private citizen at the end of the game going to pray. But what really was he was making social pressure for all of his students to comply with him.
And so how did that court case?
Oh, he won. The coach won.
Interesting. I guess it is kind of difficult to delineate like between what his intent, like you were talking about earlier. It's kind of hard to decide what his intentions were.
But when you're a person of power, it becomes what's the word? Coercive.
Okay, yeah, I can definitely see that perspective.
Mm.
I think what you'd run into with that is just how provable it is. But I could definitely see that perspective, especially as a kid. It's easy to just
Mm.
get like put into that stuff. Um, yeah, I definitely see that as an issue. I think the ones that come to my mind are, um, it's weird because a lot of people are applying religion to things that you could probably argue without the religion,
Right.
especially in the government, like gay marriage or abortion. They're bringing religion into something that like you
Yeah,
could probably
it
argue
shouldn't
without
be
it.
it shouldn't be part of the argument at
Yeah,
all.
yeah. It's like even people who are religious, a lot of them will say like, I would prefer to talk about this without bringing my religion into it because it
Mm.
shouldn't matter.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so that's where I see it. And a lot of people will say like, you're pushing your religious values on me, and it's like, well, it doesn't have to necessarily be religious for it to be against you. You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
I mean, are there any other examples in politics that you've heard that you felt some sort of
So, like, one thing that stood out to me was so adoption agencies in particular. A lot of these adoption agencies, they receive federal funds, and a lot of them are also religious adoption communities. A lot of them will refuse to adopt to gay families. There are even a bunch that would refuse to adopt to like Muslim and Jewish families or atheist families. And recently, this was 6 months, a year ago, the Supreme Court said that basically that they could still do that. They could discriminate against which families and still receive the funds.
even the government funded ones?
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, geez, are there other options for that?
There are, but a lot of adoption agencies are religious in nature.
Okay. Yeah, because
It limits the options,
yeah,
basically.
the argument would normally be like the baker to the
Mm.
gay couple, like with
Just
the
go to a
capitalist
different
society.
baker.
Yeah, just go to a different bakery.
Yeah.
But especially, I think when it involves kids.
Yeah, it's
and-
also
and
it's also a
government
really
funded.
emotional issue. You're trying to find a child that you can raise, and then someone says, "You can't raise that child. You're gay."
Mm-hmm.
It's like being punched in the gut, you know?
I had never even conceptualized that as
Mm.
being an issue.
Yep.
Because, like I said, I've heard the argument before about, like just go to a different place or do something else. But with something like that specifically, that I have not heard about that. That's
Yeah, it kind of reminded me of so when my wife and I got married, um, I wanted to have the wedding in the church I grew up with. I was still I was an atheist at the time, but I still wanted to because I had so many fond memories of that church. But when we went to talk to the head pastor, he's like, "You can't have it here. You're not a Christian." And my wife was she was real upset. She was crying, and I was mad. I was real mad. And so I have it's just like, I mean, come on. My family's really active in this church, and I have fond memories, and sure, I don't believe in God anymore, but it's just a building.
Yeah. What's weird is that wouldn't it speak enough to denounce the religion and then to come back to it to do something as sacred as marriage?
I would not.
You know what I mean? Like as
I
a
mean,
pastor,
marriage isn't necessarily a religious ceremony. We got married because, it's a ritual that is secular. It doesn't have to be religious in nature.
yeah. I mean, I think there do exist contracts that are legal alternatives to marriage specifically, which I think is, a lot in the political argument on gay marriage is that there do exist contracts that are the equivalent, but socially they don't exist, and they're not legal in every state
this was
either.
more than to me and my wife. This was more than just a contract. It was a commitment for life. There was no God involved, but we did want to commit to each other for life. It was, as you say, more of a social thing. We wanted to share this event with our families. We cared about each other, and so yeah, we wanted to get married. And I mean, we ended up having a beautiful wedding in a state park near where she grew up. So I mean, it worked out in the end.
Yeah, so you guys could find.
Oh yeah,
you guys could
it wasn't
find
it wasn't hard to
alternative.
find another venue. It's just that venue that the church in particular had some sentimental value. The pastor that was there wasn't the same one I grew up with. I think that probably probably affected it some because he didn't know me. But because I talked to my old pastor, he's like, yeah, I would have let you have a wedding here.
Yeah.
So I think that may have been part of it. That he's like, I don't know you.
Yeah, I wonder if that's.
But he knew my parents. He knew my grandparents. He knew my aunts and uncles that go there. So
I wonder if that's a consistent thing around. I mean, I imagine it is. It's the same thing with gay marriage and a lot of.
you don't you don't understand it till it actually affects you.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
where it's like, it seems like the minority, but it could very well easily be the majority. I don't know the statistics on it, so I'm not going to say that it's one of those two things. But I think you don't really think about that stuff until it happens to you, and you don't really think about it out of the context of gay marriage. But at the same time, it is like I said, it's a little unusual to kind of stray away from the religion, but then want to go back and get married in that religion. I think a lot of people assume that atheists and agnostics
They thought I wouldn't want to touch a church with
yeah.
a 10-foot pole.
Yeah, they assume that there's this animosity and this
Nah,
kind of
nah.
stubbornness against it.
Maybe
but
when
I'm not sensing that.
maybe when I was first, that's the kind of trope of the angry atheist, and actually it does exist. It's usually for atheists who have just become atheists, and the reason for that is that they have this psychological, emotional, like I've been lied to my entire life, and I'm mad about it, and so they kind of just bottle it up and then just spit it all out at once. Most people grow out of it. I know I did, but yeah, it happens. But and obviously they're also the loudest voices.
Yeah,
because they're angry.
That's what I was going to ask you about.
Yeah, but
stereotypes.
most atheists, they're not like that.
Okay, and I mean you could attest to that. You are a little bit biased, but obviously everyone's perception of a group is going to be whoever the loudest person representing that group is. So like, yeah, I wasn't expecting anything from you or your personality, but I was expecting something from just like the atheist argument, with just like I said, like this animosity. So it's very refreshing to, be pleasantly surprised by, how respectful you are to your old church and to the religion that you no longer follow. And I think,
and I still like to explore like religious topics and stuff. Like I had a friend from work say, "Hey, we're having a Bible study. Would you like to come?" He didn't know I was an atheist. I'm like, yeah. Hell yeah, I'll go. And so I did. And I told them like they were doing like a going around. Everybody tell us one thing about yourself that starts with like the letter A, C, or G. I'm like, I know I'm not telling them. And I said when they came to me, I'm like, I'm an atheist, and everyone's like, oh, that's cool. And I had like three people from my work come like, I didn't know you were an atheist.
Wow,
you're such a nice person.
Do you think? I mean, honestly. Do you think you exist in the majority, or do you think that you're kind of different in the way that you view this?
You mean like personality views?
Yeah, like personality. Do you think that
I mean,
there are truth to the stereotypes in it?
So I would say there are truth to the stereotypes in that the loudest people are like that. But I would say like 90% of atheists are just living their life and, well, I mean, there's a lot of people who are just non-religious who just consider myself like, I don't care about religion. And all those people are technically atheists, even if they don't label themselves as that. And they're just chill. They don't care. They're not going to yell about it. So the angry atheist trope exists because the loudest people are those people, but they're a minority. They're a small group.
Okay, that is refreshing. That was one of my biggest questions. Was just like, you have these people who are going to see the title and thumbnail of this video and then just be like, you know what I mean? They're just going to be upset about it.
Debate.
Yeah, and they're going to think that this is going to be some long argument. Because I would say
I don't really like debates and arguments. I prefer this kind of thing where I just have a conversation.
Yeah.
So like I haven't been in the debate club, even though they've emailed me over and over again, like please come to the debate club.
Is it because of?
I just don't like debating. I'm very introverted personally. And so I don't like combative arguments like that.
Yeah, no, that make it. Do they reach out to you because you are part of the Atheist and
No, they reach out to me because I'm a president of a club on campus, just like you.
Okay, yep. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So I was just gonna ask something, but it totally slipped my mind. Sorry. I do want to ask. You would put on the sheet that you want a discussion topic idea would have been. Being a group leader as an introvert. What does that mean to you?
Well, I mean, it makes it challenging, and it gives you a lot more room for growth as a leader, and that's something that I've struggled with, especially during the COVID times when I'd have a meeting and nobody would come. It brings you down sometimes, but it kind of also builds a bit of a resilience too. Being able to pick yourself back up again, say, maybe it's not me. I mean, obviously it's COVID. I'm gonna double down. I'm gonna set another meeting, and hopefully someone will come next time. And every once in a while they do. So I mean, our secretary, he graduated last year, so it was just me last meeting. But I'm hoping that our next meeting, because I know one of our members was like, I want to do this topic. So I'm like, well, that obviously means someone's invested in this.
At
So
least one person's
one
going.
person will come.
And so, I guess a lot of people, one, it checks out. A lot of people they see the word extrovert and they think leader, but to have a passion to lead something, knowing that you're kind of more
Yeah, I was
introverted.
passionate about it, and I was also the only person who would take the job.
Yeah, yeah. Which is interesting, because you'd think that in a school with 36,000 people that there would be a bigger collection of...
Yeah, I
Do you
mean,
think-
we have the Ask an Atheist table outside the library, and we get people coming up all the time like, I didn't know you guys existed.
Yeah, do you think that's like a marketing thing? Or do you think that
Part of
there's
it,
any...
I mean, the table is definitely partly marketing.
Okay, yeah, and then also just kind of... I mean, that'd be interesting to
Yeah.
do. That'd be interesting.
I
to
actually
do,
don't
but-
particularly. I mean, the practice predates me being there. They've been doing Ask an Atheist table forever, but I actually don't really like the Ask an Atheist thing. I'd more like instead of labeling it Ask an Atheist, I'd come and talk to me about anything,
Yeah, like,
because it gives that kind of feel. Like when people come up and they see the sign, they're like, oh, he wants to debate. Okay, I'll come debate you.
Yeah.
And the thing is, like, I'm not a debater, so I'll have a guy come up who's like really read in like theology and stuff, and he's going to talk about all these different like arguments and stuff, and I'm like just sitting there like nodding and just smiling because I'm not going to debate you. This is a social club. Like, calm down.
yeah. I mean, do you get that a lot? Because, like I said, there's definitely, there's definitely an animosity that exists from a religious standpoint to the atheist and agnostic viewpoint.
Oh yeah, and like if you look at like surveys about like what is the most hated group in America, atheists,
Really?
top of the list, above everything.
I think Jewish people are also really on that.
No, they are on the list, but they're not near the top like atheists are.
Really, I mean, that doesn't, the United States is a very religious and general. I mean, it was built upon Christian values, which.
I mean, it's not, but
What do you mean?
you can believe that. So you probably haven't read the book, but Andrew Seidel wrote a book. It was like the founding myth, why Christian nationalism is un-American. He went through all like the founding fathers and their thoughts on like religion and why they put the Establishment Clause in there, and like Jefferson's letter about the separation of church and state, building a wall between church and state. And the reason was because a lot of the founding fathers, they weren't Christians, they were deists. They believed in kind of a creator, but this creator was like, since creation is hands off, he doesn't like interact with the world. And a lot of the founding fathers, they wanted a secular country because they had seen how religion had been used, like in like Europe, to breed wars, and just they didn't want that as part of the thing. And a lot of the like really religious stuff that has kind of seeped into our government didn't actually start until the Cold War, when everybody was really anti-Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union was seen as like the atheist country. And so a lot of the things like putting God in God we trust in our money, and that being our motto, that didn't start until the Cold War and that time when everybody was really against the Soviet Union.
Yeah, I think what I mean when I say that it's based on Christian values, not that the people that were Christian, but that the ideas represented in the Bible and Christianity are generally accepted as,
I mean, they're
like, good values
there
to
are
have.
a lot of biblical like things that are just kind of common sense,
Exactly.
and a lot of those also predate the Bible too.
Yeah, and so, like, when I say, I'm not saying that it was created to exemplify those thoughts. It's just that they wanted those thoughts unrelated to religion
Yeah.
to be in society.
Yeah, and
That's I don't mean it in the like buzzword in the buzzword political spectrum.
You're not saying like the founders wanted like a theocracy.
Yeah. I'm not saying it in a negative way. I'm saying it in just like the values of the values represented in the Bible and in Christianity are generally accepted as good values.
Right, but not all of them.
Yeah, just like in general, the purpose of like as specifically the Bible is to try to teach people, even if you don't believe in anything that is said in the Bible. Like if you don't believe any of it happened, you don't believe in God or anything, there are still like morals and lessons to learn from like every story.
I mean, in the Bible, there's a lot of good stories to learn. A lot of really like like a lot of the parables and stuff. They're good, but there are also stories that are bad too.
Like what?
Like the one where well, I don't like the one where it was like Numbers, where basically it was during a war and God told him to kill all the boys and men, but capture all the girls who hadn't had any sex, and they belonged to them, the soldiers now.
I'm not gonna quote you on biblical knowledge because I know nothing of what you're talking about.
I'm not
that it doesn't exist.
I'm not super well versed in the Bible, despite my parents wanting me to be, but I know enough.
Yeah. I mean, people would hear that and then
would they say, "Nah, that's not in there"?
Well, no. People would hear that you wouldn't consider yourself well versed in the Bible, and they would kind of like they'd hear that and then say that your opinion is uneducated.
Not uneducated. I'm not like a theologian, but I would say I know more about the Bible than say the average Christian.
Okay.
Maybe not like a really religious Christian who reads a lot of the Bible, but like the average Christian, most of the time, a lot of atheists read the Bible because they want to be able to be grounded in
what they're saying.
Yeah. I don't bother because, like I said, I'm not a big debater, so I don't. It doesn't come up often.
I mean, does it make you uncomfortable? Would it make you uncomfortable if you felt that you weren't per se knowledgeable enough? Like, did you read to a point where you're like, okay, I know enough?
I mean, yeah.
Or like, do you think there's more that you could?
It's been a long time, but yeah, I read enough. I guess I just stopped caring about it.
Yeah. I guess like and I'm very frustrated by the idea of having to know something very specific to be able to talk about something or feel something. Like I really like to have conversations and just take like the essence of what, like philosophically, what does this mean?
And I guarantee you I will say something in this podcast that is completely wrong or misquote something.
Yeah, that's why I don't try to use statistics. Yeah. I really try not to use like anecdotal stories because it's really just about philosophically.
I heard this thing online, so obviously it's true.
Yeah. Like, is it going to make me? Really, all it is.
I don't feel bad about saying I was wrong or I don't know a certain thing. You know, that's a big thing that a big thing at being an atheist agnostic is saying I don't know everything. I don't know God doesn't exist, but I choose to believe that He doesn't because that's kind of how, when I weigh the evidence, that's kind of how I get. And you know, I completely respect if you come down the other way, like you're a Christian and you believe in God. I think it's more intellectually honest if you say that you could be wrong, but you're your own person.
Yeah, and I think, well, I do want to go back to that example that you gave of a story in the Bible that's bad. I mean, would you be willing to, with that specific example, do you feel like really confident in that example?
Well, I mean, that story exists, and there are also arguments for them, like, oh, it was a different time, oh, it was war, back then that happened. And, you know, the argument back would be, well, I mean, this is more than just a war. This is a war by God's people, and He should be better than that. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I mean, that's not, obviously that's not the only Bible horror story. There's this really funny, like, these people made, like, a picture book from the Bible with all the really graphic Bible scenes, like the one where these kids were, like, teasing some prophet because he was bald, and so he called down like angry bears, and they ripped the kids to shreds. Yeah, that one's funny.
Yeah, you really don't hear about this stuff.
Well, I mean, they're inconvenient, so.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, if people quoted those Bible verses at church instead of, the love your neighbor kind of stuff, less people would come to church.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, do you think that stories like that invalidate the morals of the Bible, or do you just think that, like, you shouldn't take it 100% because there are some things in here that
Right.
are not great?
It's a product of its time, and it's a product of, people. So I don't think that just because those stories exist in the Bible doesn't mean everybody who reads the Bible is a bad person. I mean, most Christians pick and choose the Bible verses that they like, and then they just toss out everything else. I mean, that's what Thomas Jefferson did. He just took a scalpel and he just cut out all the verses he didn't like. He just tossed them, and then he just kept the rest of it. I mean, most people who are honest would say, "Yeah, I don't believe in this, and this in the Bible, but I mean, I still believe the rest of the Bible. I'm still a Christian. I still believe in God." And that's fine.
I mean,
I think it makes you more moral than your religion.
Yeah, to understand that there are things in here that you don't agree with.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing. I think that's my favorite point of conversation to talk about, but especially with politically. What's up?
Sorry, I'd just like to jump in. I looked up the story about the prophet.
Okay, yeah.
And the prophet who did that, his name was Elijah.
We don't need to talk about that. That's so funny. That's so funny.
That's all.
But yeah, my favorite topic to like talk about with people is just this kind of brainwash thing that exists on both sides of every issue, to where it's like, if you're not able to pick and choose, if you're not able to take some things from some things and some things from other, and you're so gung-ho and you really think that one label perfectly encapsulates what you are.
No one ever is just one label.
Yeah, but a lot of people will say that they are.
Right.
And and it'll be like it's the same thing. Like I'm generally like middle of the road leaning right. And so it's like I'm not going to hear everything that like Ben Shapiro says and then just believe it because he says it. You know what I mean? It's like I have to take what he says, hear it, and then like bring it back to me, and it's like, what do I believe based on what he says? And if you don't do that for every single thing, it's kind of just a silly viewpoint.
Yeah, you don't want to just take in all the information, just stuff it in. You actually have to like process it.
Yeah, and it's so polarizing to just like kind of turn it off and just say like, I agree with this guy because he supports my side. I agree with this thing.
I mean, that's why it's good. It's why these type of podcasts work so well.
Yeah,
because that's what people crave.
Some people are hungry for something that doesn't just make them hate.
Yeah, I mean, if you keep hearing the same thing over and over again, it gets boring.
Yeah,
I want to hear something new.
Yeah, I want to hear two guys, because I wouldn't say. I mean, I don't necessarily know what I'd be religiously. What I believe. I believe that there are stories and morals in the Bible, and pretty much every story in the Bible you could probably take and use it to try to make you a better person. For a lot of stories in the Bible, there are a lot of subliminal messaging that you don't have to believe the Bible to understand. You know what I mean? But I don't really like the church. I don't like the idea of going to church. And I don't even really like the idea of following the Bible as a rule book either. It makes me uncomfortable to have somebody else. It's the same thing, like my pastor can become my Ben Shapiro, and it's like I don't need to just hear everything that he says and just believe it. I mean, that's just silly.
The thing is that if you took the Bible as like a literal rule book, like would you trust a robot that was programmed to follow everything in the Bible exactly? Would you trust it with your kids?
No.
Exactly.
Because there are a lot of, like you said, just dated stories in the Bible.
Exactly.
But I also don't think that any Christians are, well, there definitely exist.
Yeah.
But I don't think there are a lot of Christians who are like everything in the Bible is completely
because that's the intellectually honest thing to say is that.
So you say that you could take any lesson out of the Bible.
Don't test me on
2
that.
Kings 23 or 2:23 through 24. From there, Elijah went to Bethel.
No.
As he was walking along the road, some boys came out from the town and jeered at him. "Get out of here, Baldy," they said. "Get out of here, Baldy." He turned around, looked at them, and called down a curse on them in the name of the Lord. Then 2 bears came out of the woods and mauled 42 of the boys.
No way.
That is apparently how it is worded.
So
That is the direct verbiage.
That is
So what's the moral
exactly
of the
what-
story?
Yeah, Elijah, tell
Don't
us.
insult bald people.
Yeah, be nice, otherwise you're going to die. Yeah, I mean, like, obviously, I mean, in general, there are a lot of dated things, but
Yeah.
you could take the general themes of the Bible and then try to use it to make. I mean, you can use anything, and that's one of the big questions that I was going to ask you, and that I'll ask you now. Like, how does being atheist and agnostic serve you as a person? Like, how does it make you, how does it make you a better person? Like, how does it?
It's kind of just neutral. It's just there. I mean, I'd like to think that leaving religion specifically made me a better person, but not becoming an atheist.
Okay, and then what about leaving religion?
So, I mean,
specifically made
growing
you a
up
better
in the religious community, there was a lot of the like hate against the LGBT community. You get a lot of those messages that when you kind of leave the religion and you don't have a reason for it anymore, you're like, well, now that I look back on it, like, that was bad. I was a bad person. I wasn't a bad person, but I believed things that hurt other people, and I think leaving the religion did make me a better person.
I mean, would you say that it was specifically the religion that holds that values, or do you think there exists
it's
other?
the dogma that the religion is connected to.
Okay, I mean, but
You can't separate them, unfortunately.
I would actually argue that you could with, I guess, not necessarily hate, but just like, I think you can disagree with, like, I think a lot of the religious, that's kind of what I was saying with the Bible, like, a lot of religious values exist unrelated to religion, and there are arguments that you could definitely do or say or believe that are completely unrelated to religion. It's kind of like bringing religion into this. It's like with the LGBTQ example that you brought up, a lot of the people who dislike that movement or dislike those people for any reason, and I'm not condoning that, I'm just saying, like, the people who do that, there are definitely people who exist that aren't religious that believe that.
You're not wrong. That's
And
correct.
so, I guess I agree with what you're saying in that if you felt as if those ideas made you a worse person, then leaving it would be the best option. But I do feel uncomfortable saying that. Same thing with trying to generalize like any position.
Right. Well,
saying
once
that,
you
like, it
start
doesn't
generalizing
exist.
anything, you've lost.
Yeah, and so it's like saying that that you can't separate that, or that one.
Oh
doesn't
no,
exist
you
without
can
the
definitely
other.
separate
Yeah.
that. I mean, that's obviously not the only example I have.
Yeah. It
It's
just
just
makes
the
me
most-
comfortable
it's
to
just the
blame
most-
religion for
Most
that.
potent one, I think.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that like your church didn't have those values or didn't say those things.
My
And I've
church was
seen-
actually really liberal when it comes to churches.
really.
Yeah, I was in a Wesleyan Methodist church, and it wasn't quite the fire and brimstone stuff you can find
That
in
you
like the
can
Bible
find.
Belt and stuff.
Yeah,
It wasn't. They didn't preach hateful stuff, but there was always that undertone
Yeah.
that it kind of hides itself, because especially now that it's become like socially not acceptable to be like bigoted against that community. So a lot of times it just buries itself, but it's still there under the surface.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if you're talking like Christian to Christian, you'll hear it come up. You'll hear what people really think.
Mm-hmm. And I just started a sentence and then drank water.
Oh,
Yeah.
at least you're not choking on it. So.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, and I definitely see where you're coming from, and that's the same thing with just like anything that you go so gun ho about, you're going to just like start hitting these barriers that are just unacceptable. And I'm not saying that disagreeing with the ideas of like the LGBT community or maybe some of like the laws or some of just like the overarching social ideas of it is inherently wrong, but any hate towards it, any distaste or any just disrespect in general, like I could definitely see that being a reason to leave. You know what I mean? Like when that exists, it like it's definitely an
I mean,
issue.
in the end, the reason I left was not that reason. My reason I left was because I didn't believe it anymore. So
And I guess I do want to ask. So, I mean, do you agree that do you have any? I know we're talking a lot about Christianity, and there are other religions that you can fall off of to become atheist
Right,
and
yeah.
agnostic. So that's just my area.
yeah, there's
of
a strong
knowledge.
community of like people who've left Islam. It's actually a lot more dangerous to leave Islam than is
Oh,
Christianity. Because
absolutely.
you leave Christianity, your parents might not like it. Maybe you'll get some, like, you'll lose some friends or in family. Or in Islam, they'll kill you.
Yeah. It's definitely a much bigger
Yeah.
issue. Same with it being, homosexual or just like any LGBTQ. I mean,
Thrown off a building.
yeah, there's definitely, and not knowing the statistics or facts on that, I'm not going to say that maybe that's just an overused example, and it's not actually like that. I'm not saying, I'm not going to speak to that. It could be true, it could not be. But do you think that there are some areas in, or we were talking about how there are lessons in the Bible. I mean, do you think there are some values that are generally thought of as Christian values that you agree with, that you believe in?
Well, I mean, there's things like the golden rule, which is do unto you as you do to yourself. However, a better version of that would be help, treat people. So the golden rule would be treat others the way you want to be treated.
Mm-hmm.
And like in philosophy, a lot of people would actually say treat other people the way they want to be treated, because maybe they don't want to be treated the same way that you would be treated.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they have a different preference, and so that is a good thing in the Bible, and it could be improved, but it's a good thing in the Bible, and that actually it comes from before the Bible. That was a philosophical idea that was actually predated Christianity.
Okay.
But there are other good things, like I'm a bit of a socialist myself, so I kind of like Jesus' hate for the rich.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Understandable.
But yeah, I mean, there are good things in the Bible, and I think that you can be a non-religious person and read the Bible and use those ideas. I mean, you may not come to like the more like supernatural things, like okay, that's a little bit too much, but the kind of life lessons and some moral issues. I mean, there's some moral issues in the Bible that you probably shouldn't follow, but there are some in there that are pretty good. A lot of them aren't unique to the Bible, but that doesn't mean that they aren't good lessons to learn.
Yeah, and the biggest thing to understand is that a lot of those lessons that is people's introduction to those lessons.
Right.
So it's like it doesn't matter if it was, or I guess it does matter, for some standpoint. For most people, it doesn't really bother them that a lot of the morals predate the Bible, because that's what taught them that, was the religion. So I do understand. I guess what I'm asking is like, where is your line then? So like, there are things, like what are the things that you don't believe in? Like the things that like created this thought, this change in your perspective and religion. Like
So
what was
are you
it?
asking what kind of precipitated my
Yeah,
my
like
leaving?
what specifically
Specifically,
about it do you not believe
the
in,
change
or-
point was likely a world religions class, actually, believe it or not, here on campus. 2013. I took a world religions class because it sounded interesting. But being shown all these different religions, a lot of them that would like feed into the other one, like you had like Judaism, which actually fed into Christianity, and then Christianity fed like Mormonism, and so I mean you had all these interconnected religions, and then of course you have all the denominations that disagree with different things in the religion. And I realized with all this mishmash, I'm like, well, obviously they can't all be correct.
Mm-hmm.
It's either got to be one of them or none. And so when you start like going through each one and like, okay, right there, yeah, that's not me. And then I finally like, well, I better go through my own religion, because I'm obviously throwing out like Islam and Judaism and all these other religions for, I'm going to use these same reasons that I'm throwing those out on my own religion. I realized I'd have to throw that one out too.
Mm-hmm. No, that definitely makes sense, and that's kind of, you said you listened to some of the philosophy one. I don't know if you're talking about, but another one of my favorite topics of conversation is this idea that in truth, somebody is right and somebody is wrong in general. And
Or
so
they
it's
could
like-
be both wrong.
Yeah, or they could be both. Yeah, exactly. So it's like when you have a conversation with somebody and you are so believing in what you believe, they are on the exact opposite side of that, feeling the exact same way. And it's the same thing with religions. It's like, how do all these religions exist? And everyone believes something different, and you kind of have to wonder which one is the actual truth.
Right.
And once you start picking it apart, I completely see where you're getting from. And that's something that I was kind of thinking too, because I've talked a lot about religion just with my friends, because some of my friends are religious, some of them are not. And so I've talked to them about this, and it's like what you end up having to do is creating just exactly what you've said, like your own religion. And it's like creating what you
Custom
genuinely,
religion,
yeah.
yeah.
Just build your own, build a bear,
Yeah.
build a religion workshop. You know what I mean? And it's kind of like create what fits you the best. And what I've said, and kind of what I want the theme of this podcast to be, is what serves you. You know, like what makes you the best version of you. Like what belief system is going to make you a productive and good person.
Right.
And so it's like what it ended up being was generally Christian values, but understanding that there are so many, you can't just believe what somebody else says.
Right.
You can't just believe things because somebody who is.
I mean, but for a lot of people, that's the comfortable thing to do. It's just
Yeah.
to believe what they've been told by their parents, their pastor, and not, don't rock the boat, because it's psychologically distressing to have everything you believe or everything you were told turned upside down.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know people who have changed and who have kind of like slowly weaned off, or who have become stronger in it. And it's like, it's so uncomfortable. And I think that's one of the things that people have, and I personally have had issues with, just thinking about conceptually the idea of defining yourself as atheist and agnostic, is if you had the goal, because some of people have the goal to, like you said, like that stereotype of the loud, angry atheist. Those people have the goal to
They're almost
people,
like street preachers.
Yeah, like to convince people to kind of tear that down, and that's so wildly uncomfortable for somebody. And it's like, it's gonna shut them off instantly.
Yeah, tearing down someone else's faith and religion is not productive. No. Everybody's just going to double down and say they're just going to double down. I mean, psychologically, that's the mechanism that's going to happen. It's like as soon as you start contradicting someone, even if you throw in as many facts and statistics as possible at them, they're just going to double down, because that's how the brain that's how it's wired to protect itself from psychological distress and cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
I'm a psychology major, so this is
me
something
too.
I like talking about.
Yeah. I'm a psychology major with a philosophy minor, and I was thinking about taking a religion class, but it's not something. It's something that I think you could just take. Like I've said, like you have the actual concept, you can kind of just take the philosophy out of it and then just talk about.
I mean, I'm taking this semester a philosophy of religion class. That one's real interesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, because I'm a philosophy minor.
Yeah, so that would be a good choice.
That just like, it's really just almost a hobby. Hence the podcast.
It's fun because the class sizes are really small. So basically, everybody's like debating everybody during this class, and the teacher's basically just the moderator.
Yeah, it's just making sure that things are all right.
Yeah.
Which is how a philosophy class, which is how most people who take a philosophy class would want it to be.
Yeah.
They just want it to be a conversation.
I haven't taken many philosophy classes. I actually don't do that great in them, to be honest.
Yeah, they're kind of hard as far as like
the thing is that they're very writing heavy, and I don't like writing a lot.
I'm a big writer, so I like writing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, no, I think what's very interesting about this conversation that I'm finding is that there's so much common ground, and I think, which this is such a difficult ask to ask of you or a religious person, is to be like, this is going to be uncomfortable, but to try not to get like emotionally heated or like emotionally invested.
I mean, for some people it's difficult, not for me.
Yeah. For some people just, I mean, again, like we were talking about, it's so uncomfortable. You know what I mean? And a lot of people who are super religious, it's like, if you're going to have this conversation, as much as you don't want to try to step down to that, I mean, not even down, but as much as you don't want, you might not want to participate in like the act of making someone feel more comfortable, you really have to.
I mean, a lot of people, their entire identity is just like their religion. And so trying to like say you're wrong is painful.
You have to have compassion for that,
right? Yeah.
In these conversations.
Yeah, I mean, you guys talked about Socrates in the philosophy video, and personally, I really like using the Socratic method at the tables that we do. That's why I don't like the Ask an Atheist, because they're asking me. I prefer for myself to be asking the questions, because it's the easiest way for people to deconstruct and reassemble their own beliefs, and so they obviously won't come away saying, "Oh, I'm an atheist too," but they're going to come away saying, "I haven't thought about that."
Yeah, I've never actually put that much thought into something like this, And
And that's just the beauty of the Socratic method.
yeah, and I'd encourage all atheists, and I'm sure you would too, to do the same thing with their own belief. Because
yeah.
I don't, I feel like in talking about this, we've kind of not strayed, but it seems more leaning towards like an atheist point of view, and I don't want that, or it seems more so throwing the ball up to the the Christian side of things or the religious side of things. When I feel like everything that we're talking about also exists with the atheist and agnostic.
I mean,
people
you
as
would
well.
you would think, but I mean, atheism is just the lack of belief in God. Most atheists will just not talk about it and say, I mean, I identify as an atheist because I'm not religious, but I don't care, and I don't really have, it's not a position that I'm trying to defend like Christianity is. Atheism is just the lack of belief, and a lot of them will also say, I could be wrong too. So like, I'm not going to try and like defend my identity as an atheist. I just am an atheist.
Okay, I mean, do you think that is, again, do you think that's consistent with the majority of people who are atheists, or do you think that that's...
Yes, and a lot of those people just call themselves non-religious instead of atheists.
Okay. I mean, again,
It's
I
like
haven't
half the country now, I
Yeah,
think.
really?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's big.
Yeah, I haven't met a lot of people who call themselves atheists or agnostic.
Right, because it's a loaded term.
Yeah,
It's, like I said, people hate atheists because they see them as evil bad guys. Or, the stereotypes come out. But if you are a person who doesn't believe in a higher power, you're an atheist. You don't have to label yourself as an atheist, but on a technical level, that's what you are, because you lack the belief in God. And a big thing about the Atheist and Agnostic Society and a lot of other groups that are in that realm, like the Lynn County Humanist Society or Iowa Atheists, a big thing is trying to deconstruct that stereotype of atheists and make it not like a word that's dirty and it sounds bad. I mean, we're just who we are. We're not evil people. We're not.
Yeah.
And another thing is like, oh, you're an atheist, so you worship Satan.
Yeah. Yep. I've heard a lot about that too.
It's funny.
Yeah.
I don't believe in Satan, so I don't worship him.
I guess, would you wish the same for religious people?
Nobody should feel that way.
Nobody. I mean, would you wish would you wish that stigma does not exist in religious people from an atheist point of view?
What do you mean?
So, like, there exists a stigma against atheists and agnostic people that they are, they're loud, they're, like, oppressive, they're argumentative, they're all these bad things. And it's like,
I mean,
a lot of people who believe that are Christians.
It's just not a true
Yeah,
stereotype.
it's not true at
So
all.
if anybody wants to believe, what is true, then they're going to want to throw that out because it doesn't. I mean, like I said, hateful atheists exist, hateful Christians exist. They exist. They're loud. They often get more attention than they should. But if you look at like 99% of the population of Christians and 99% of atheists, they're just people.
That's kind of what I was getting at. I kind of wanted you to just clarify that. Like,
Yeah.
you don't believe that this is the majority of Christians. Okay.
Oh,
That's
no.
kind of what I wanted you to clarify,
Oh, no.
because I really want to play things on both sides
Mm.
of like and make sure that we're not like leaning super heavy against something, because that's the exact same thing that who we disagree with is doing to us.
Right.
And so it's like to try not to make sure that both those coins are, we can see both sides of that coin. So that's kind of what I was getting at, is just like, it definitely exists, and it definitely is an issue when it exists, you know what I mean? But it's not the majority,
Right.
You know what I mean? And it's the same thing with atheists, and that's something that I had assumed, because you learn so much in psych classes that pretty much all of your stereotypes are just like the availability heuristic and like just
Exactly.
a bunch of just things
Yes.
that just hop in and that you don't really...
Well, I mean, there is an evolutionary use for that. I mean, a
Yeah,
lot of
yeah.
times, technically, a lot of times those stereotypes are built on actual reality. And that's why our brains use it, because it frees up a lot of the mental processes.
Oh yeah, it's an easy way of thinking, and I also
But every
think,
once in a while, you'll get a stereotype that's just not true.
yeah, and I think another thing is with the internet and this ability to communicate with everybody all the time, it's like the availability heuristic, just this
Now it's
idea
all there.
it's like,
all out in the open.
yeah, everyone is, it's so much easier to do that, which is honestly why I'd think
It also
that those stereotypes.
It also depersonalizes everything, so you find it easier to say things that you wouldn't tell somebody.
Oh
to
yeah,
their
absolutely
face.
would not say it,
Yeah.
in person, which is, yeah, it just kind of spreads this stereotype. Like, you think, how can this stereotype exist if there's zero truth to it? And it's like,
I mean,
it
like
could
I said,
exist,
not zero, just
but like,
small.
if there's not as much truth as the stereotype would lead you to believe it, it's definitely because, I mean, you and me are talking to hundreds of people right now. Hopefully, maybe thousands, guys. If you, no, I'm kidding. But
you look
you
at
know
the
what-
tech, oh,
yeah.
there's only 3 people that
Yeah,
watch it. Oh.
you're like, well, it's like, if you take this conversation, we're talking to hundreds of people right now, and we don't necessarily know who we're talking to. It's like our ideas are being presented in that, and so you think about it in that way, and it's like, of course, stereotypes. If I was kind of a more hateful person, then my stereotypes could reach 100 people, and it's like, despite those people having never experienced that exact stereotype before, they are still exposed to that because I'm telling them that's how it is. And so I think that's what spreads so much of this, just like stereotypes that really do not hold water.
Yeah, I mean, but the internet the internet has some messy stuff, but I think on the whole, it is a good net good.
Oh, I'm absolutely on that boat too, especially with politics and just awareness.
Yeah,
in
people
general.
know things that they would have never
never
known about.
Yeah, especially with
You can't
like
hide
the
that stuff
government
anymore.
and like
Yeah.
people with a lot of resources to be able to hide something or do something. It's really just like out in the open.
Yeah.
And that's a really good thing, as well as, I mean, just communication in general. Like, these ideas, the conversation, I'm not going to say the conversation we're having because it's kind of big-headed, but the conversation that other podcasts have that really tried to just kind of be a conversation, not a debate, not focused on polarization. It's like, that stuff is really great on the internet. And it's just, some people are using that they know that it amasses a following to kind of polarize on an issue, when in actuality, most people truly believe things from both sides.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I do think that there are great things about the internet, hence why I'm doing an internet podcast.
Yeah.
So we've hit an hour, like slightly over. So I would love to do a part 2 with you.
Definitely. Yeah.
Just because I love conversation, and this was great. But if there's any last plugging that you want to do, if you want to talk about when you guys meet, what your email is,
Sure.
anything like that.
So, I mean, like I just said, our next meeting is going to be counter-apologetics, which it'll be fun. Like I said, I'm not a big debater, but it was requested, and it sounded like a good idea. So that's what we're going to do. We meet every other Wednesday in the Memorial Union at 5:30.
Well, what room in the morning?
Shoot. That's a good question.
Oh, well, can we look it up on the club website? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's the best way to get updates is our email, isuaas@gmail.com. And also you can always go to the student org webpage, and that's the best way to find not just our club, but any club. And there are so many of them. Like I went on the club website and I was looking, and I joined like 3 new clubs that sound interesting. It was the First Amendment Club, and then there's like one that's like it's actually like a discussion club where they just discuss topics like this that are controversial. And so yeah, even if you don't want to come to Atheist and Agnostic Society, you'll definitely find something there that will interest you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's going to wrap it up. It was great talking with you, James. So it was a pleasure having you on here.
Yeah, no problem.
Awesome.